And we're up. I'll send that out. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to our live for March of the Moderns. My name is Margaret, which you all probably know, and welcome to this BookTube live discussion. What we have going on today is a live chat about Passage to India, so you can see. And welcome to this BookTube live discussion. What we have going on today is, here we go. Sorry, I didn't think that would go when I was not on that tab. Still learning. So what we have today is a live discussion of this book by E.M. Forster. And I'd like to introduce my buddy reader, Rainer of Rainierbooks. And I learned about his channel. I'm not sure how. It's been several months now. We've been chatting back and forth about things. He is a German person living in Sweden and soon to move. We're all excited about all the awards that he posts about and predictions and vlogs in Sweden, which has been a beautiful winter to observe. And of course, great reads that he passes on, critical subjects and topics and things that he discusses with us. So welcome, Rainer.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and good evening, I have to say, because it's 8 p.m. already here in Sweden. It's dark outside, but the days are getting brighter each and every day now. And thanks for that beautiful introduction.
Of course, of course. So we're going to hop on to, let's see, I need to put up the buddy reads. So I put that out in the chat. And then I wanted to, in case Lana ends up watching this later, point out that this is my second attempt at a costume for the period. So we've got...
I was wondering.
Yes,
I didn't actually dare to say something, but I was wondering.
Edwardian hair. So for A Passage to India, we are firmly in the Edwardian mode. The British Empire, the colonials abroad, and so I'm sure we'll have lots to say about that. I'm going to put a bit of your information in the chat below, but why don't we just start off with initial thoughts or enjoyment of the read, because first impressions are always a good hint as to whether other people should pick this up or not.
Well, I think it was in the beginning, as I told you, I sent you some messages. In the beginning, it was a slow read for me, and it was thinking, okay, this is a buddy read. We have to do this now because we have agreed on it. And it was a bit slow, but then it got better and better for me because I understood how much there is inside that novel and how much E.M. Forster has really shaped this, and that he's really master of storytelling. And then I was a little bit astonished, but that's already about his biography, that it was his last novel, actually, and he lived 46 years on after this.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he started this because he wanted to do something completely different. Didn't work, put it on the shelf, went out to India, did a lot more stuff, wrote another book, came back to it, and then sort of found what he wanted to say about it. And return to the story. It gives me hope as a writer, coming back to things. Yeah, excellent.
For me, it was pretty. Sometimes it was not easy to follow everything. There are a lot of words connected to India. I don't know how you did it, but when I look out at my Kindle, I always get an explanation from the dictionary, or I get a link to Wikipedia. So very often I ended up in Wikipedia with all these clothes and celebrations where he uses vocabulary from India.
Right. Do you remember what puka means? P-U-K-K-A? That was one I didn't look up.
No, I know.
Yeah, I sort of didn't get it, but I was like, fine, I'll just keep going. I don't think it's crucial. I was reading it from a Project Gutenberg copy, because I requested it from the library, but it took much longer than I expected, and so I didn't have it in time. So I was reading a free ebook copy, which I think there were errors because it wasn't a photographed copy, it was a typed up copy, and there were some sort of weird sentence things where I was like, I don't think this makes sense. So I had to sort of glaze over several of those and be like, whatever, this is
But you were reading quite quickly, weren't you? Because you were, I was 50% into the novel when you hadn't started it, but then you sort of speeded through it.
Yeah, I think I started it Sunday or Friday when you wrote, and so we were like Twitter messaging, and yeah, I was worried because I looked at the last 3 books I had for buddy reads, and I was like, okay, who's going to be the stinker? Who's going to be like the problem read?
Yeah.
So I was a little worried about this, so I prioritized it, but it went pretty quickly. It wasn't as long as, or it didn't feel as long as it looked, I should say. When I started, I was a bit worried as well, because for me, my first impression was that the voice is so personal and like the narrator putting his thumb on the scales. There's a lot of inserted commentary about the landscape and flowery language, and about like definitely judgments of the culture and the society, and about specific people once you get to know them. And like the narrator calls people Red Nose and Mrs. Red Nose and at the beginning. And so I was a little curious about that and a little wary, but then I think as it goes on, you get more comfortable with what that voice is saying, and it doesn't seem as subjective. It seems more like wondering and dreamy and vague, and sort of it steps back at the end, I feel like. I don't know. How did you feel about the voice and that in between?
Yeah, sometimes the chapters start with a long description, and this seemed to me a little bit like Movieish. I have one example here when I don't know from which chapter that was. I have to look at my Goodread notes here. He starts a chapter after 30% into the novel. It starts, never tranquil, never perfectly dark. The night wore itself away, distinguished from other nights by 2 or 3 blasts of wind, which seemed to fall perpendicularly out of the sky and to bounce back into it, hard and compact, leaving no freshness behind them. The hot weather was approaching. That's so beautiful, but also so distant, like a little. I see a movie camera somehow.
Yeah.
In front of my eyes when I read this.
That's so funny. So you're talking about a different intro. I thought you were going to go to one of the quotes that I highlighted on page 254 in my version. The night was still dark, but had acquired the temporary look that indicates its end. Perched on the roof of a shed, the station master's hens began to dream of kites instead of owls. And I loved, okay, you're not going to get that in cinema because it's what birds are thinking. I mean, that's not something you can portray. But I loved how it was introducing the time. And I don't think many people have patience to read passages of time like that. You know, like introducing the way time passes in a novel is always a little bit tricky. But getting into a bird's head and having a bird dream about a different sort of predator to fear because the light is changing. I thought that was so creative and, of the time. We'll find that now. Oh, although I haven't read H's for Hawk. Maybe she gets into birds' heads. So,
but I also felt that I don't know much about the history of India and the British colonization of India. I had seen the term Raj, or however it's pronounced, R-A-G, before, but I wasn't aware of the historical
context.
Exactly. That was. So I was really surprised about the character. I think we have to tell people something about the novel, what is it about, but about this guy Fielding, who's so, in a way, he's very progressive, I think. And I was really astonished because I have to confess that the most I knew from the history of India was probably from Sir Richard Attenborough's movie Gandhi with Ben Kingsley in 1982. And that was 1947 when India got independent, and this is the 1920s, so it was still inside the British Empire.
Yes.
And Fielding is pretty much very progressive character, I think, in the beginning.
Did you think it was about Fielding?
No.
Okay, because that's what you said. So I was gonna pin that to you and say if that really fit. So I'm going to put a link to a library article. I guess I'm more familiar with British Empire stuff because I read a lot of British books, and I'm not as familiar with the colonial parts of India setting, but definitely thinking about it in terms of the East India Company and the corporation and sort of the 18th to 19th century growth and business stuff and how that changed. But yeah, this is the first set in India, maybe not. No. I've definitely read like romances that are, very take a very light touch on the historical context. But the article that I found that was very interesting was from the British Library, and it posits that the central question of this novel is, can an English man and an Indian man be friends? And I changed the wording a little bit because I didn't like their wording. So we've got Dr. Aziz and we've got Mr. Fielding, and I would say they're both treated as central characters, as I think Aziz a little bit more. What would you say about like who's the protagonist in the story?
Oh, that's very difficult. I think both Aziz and Fielding, and Fielding, I still think that is probably, his name starts with F, is probably also a little bit Forster himself.
That's a good point. Okay, I love the name thing. I love going after names. And there's one that jumped out at me in this book, which is Mrs. Moore. Does that ring? Does that ring for you?
No.
Because one of the words to describe Muslims in different parts of history for the British has been Moor, O-O-R, okay. And it's just adding an E. And she's the one who is most sympathetic. And so I thought, oh gosh, hit me over the head with that one, Forster.
But I also read that the women characters, Mrs. Moore and Adela Quested, are only used or introduced into the whole history to sort of establish what you say, the discussion of the friendship and the challenges to the friendship between Aziz and Fielding. Everything else, the caves at Makabar, I think, are only a vehicle for this story of the friendship between these two guys and between the two countries, probably. Okay. So that might be, because I found many sources that say exactly the same thing, and it sounds pretty plausible when you think about it.
Well, so here's something that I found very interesting. When I was thinking about that, I was looking at, okay, he's using the British Empire as a way to explore racism, but let's see if I can get this out in a way that is succinct. This is the hard part. When I think of British male authors of this period or after exploring post-colonialism and the feelings of independence and equality, often they sort of leave women in the dust and don't really consider the sexism that's inherent in it. But one of the things that poked out at me was from hood feminism, if you'll believe it. The racism requires patriarchy to hold it up as well. So when I think of the very pointed reference to, you can't like Indians and British women, you have to choose, because either you uphold the structure of patriarchy, which links hand in hand with racism and the empire, or you are friends with Indians as equals and accept that there should be no conqueror relationship in this at all. So I don't know if, well, like you said, Forster was very ahead of his time. So I feel like that is probably something that he was thinking of when he put up that comparison. What do you think?
That might be. I was also wondering, how old is Adela Quested, actually? She must be like 18, 19, 20 years, not more. What do you think?
I thought she would be older.
Yeah.
I thought she was like mid-20s, which is like older for the period, but not like...
Yeah, because she's going to India to marry Ronnie, and to get engaged and to marry Ronnie, and I guess women married very early in the 1910s and 1920s.
Yes, but they were also, I think, like childhood friends or school friends, and so I feel like they're closer in age than maybe like the previous decade would have assumed. So the way that they talk about her being plain and not fitting in, I feel like sort of like spinster image comes to mind. So I feel like she's not so inexperienced. The role that she has and again, the name quested. There's like a quest, a question, a questioning nature in there, because at the beginning she is set apart from the Anglo-Indians, and that's not something I'd heard of before. Anglo-Indians as a category, but it's very clearly set up as they're the group that you end up being whether you like it or not, because the atmosphere and the society will mold you so that you fit into this oppositional force to the native population, you know? So I feel like her very avowed inclination to fight against that, even if she marries into it, was like the idealism of the beginning. But I feel like an 18-year-old would probably not have that.
But there's also this naivete about India that both Mrs. Moore has it also, because they want to experience the real India.
Yeah,
there's a lot about the real India in the book as well.
Yeah,
and that's why they end up in the caves, actually, also because they think that Aziz is going to show them the real India,
right?
Apart from the colonial life with all the parties and polo games,
club. The tennis, right? So yeah, that's part, I think, of the empire and the colonial context is when and tourism today. So that's something that I felt like could directly relate to today, 100 years later. We have people who are seeking the real soul of a place, but not wanting to immerse themselves in the actual culture. It's like it's cultural appropriation is what it is, because you want to sanitize the parts that are already being exported to you and appreciate those, but not really like lay yourself open to understanding something different from you. Yeah. I've had a few things about that. other contexts. Yeah. Let me skip over the spoiler question.
We don't do spoilers, don't we? Or
I usually end up doing them, but I have a little banner that I put up so that if people are watching this later, they don't get spoiled. Let me just put out that article, though.
Because there are interesting twists and turns, which we may not should tell people in the beginning, but I suppose that people who watch this will have read the novel. I remember that we had at least a seminar, which I didn't attend when I studied English in Aachen many years ago. We had a seminar where Forster and the Passage to India was on the schedule, but I didn't attend.
Were you supposed to, or was it optional?
No. We could choose.
Oh, okay. Oh,
I went more into American literature than British. And we had two professors. One was teaching British, and the other one was teaching American literature.
Is that the person that was from Stockton that you were referring to?
No, he was only a guest professor. But he was amazing. Good, actually. He's unfortunately he's passed many years ago, but if he would be here, he could sort of transfer us into Forster's time. He would tell us all about India, and you would feel like you were in India. And then after his lecture, you had to be woken up from the hypnosis. He was really great.
Yeah. Did you feel like it was immersive when you were reading? Did it give you enough detail? For me, the detail that was given was very image rich and sensation rich in terms of smells and temperatures and vistas, but it was so dreamlike. It sort of didn't make me feel like I was there in some respect.
Yeah, especially the last part was a bit difficult as well for me. I mean, I read any kind of book in English, but the last part with the Hindu stuff is really very difficult to understand everything, everything that he's describing, all the impressions.
Yeah. We had Marissa and Tony and I were discussing a kiss that happened in Precious Bane, and it was kind of like we skipped over it and we thought we knew what happened, but then it was referenced later as something different, and so we had to go back and trace. And it's kind of the same thing. There are some things that it just flows over and you think you understand what's happening, but then something is mentioned later and you're like, wait, did I read that wrong? Like, it took me several tries to try to figure out what happened with the boats in the pool, because I don't understand the tanks. Like, why do they have big holding tanks of water? because the drought and the rainy season, like that's one context clue I did not have. But boats in the water, but it was very shallow, and they tipped over and they hit each other, and they were right next to all the religious celebrants, and I was confused.
Oh, that's good to hear.
It's not just you. It was some of those things you just kind of have to figure out there. What did you think about the title? There's another simple one.
I didn't read the poem. I read that it comes from a poem by Walt Whitman, which is called Passage to India, without the article.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, but I haven't read it because it's super long. It's really very long poem, but it's a good question, the title. But it's always a question about titles of books and novels, because sometimes authors, I don't know if it's actually the author always who sets the title. You are an author. What do you say? Is the publisher giving the title to a novel? Because in the business of newspapers, it's almost never the journalist who puts the title. It's always someone at the papers, the editors who do this. So a Passage to India, well, that would be the passage from literally it's probably the passage that Adela and Mrs. Moore do, because they travel to India. I actually didn't know how they traveled to India at the time. That was very interesting to me, because we're thinking of airplanes, right?
Oh no. Yeah.
And of course, they had to go to Egypt and somewhere cross the Red Sea, and then they traveled in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's a passage, the boat passage to India.
I think it also mirrors his, the author's sort of passage to learning more about the country and the struggle for independence. So when he was there in 1912, I think, for the first time when he started the book, he had impressions that he wrote down and he wasn't satisfied, right? And then he laid it by and came back to it in 21 or 23. And that is when he'd spent a much longer time, like a year or so there. And things had changed because it was after the war. The British Empire was changing. The British government was changing. Attitudes were changing. And so I feel like it's very clear that he's got anti-imperialist sentiments, and he's like sprinkling them throughout this novel. And that part of that is his journey to learning more about the culture and realizing that they didn't belong there.
Yeah, that's what was interesting to me. I wanted to know more about the reception of the novel in the time when it was published, because there must have been folks who didn't like his way of thinking at all.
Yeah,
because it was anti-empire. But the only thing I found was an article in The Guardian from 1924, and The Guardian apparently was already a liberal left-tending newspaper in 1924, because it was a pretty positive review.
Oh, okay.
And they praised the book, but I would have liked to read something negative about it, because there must be a lot of negative reactions.
So I think in this article that I posted, they talk about some of the themes, but also some of the reception. And I remember that a lot of people were disappointed that it was so vague. Like they wanted more of a resolution. So when I think about that, I think, well, there wasn't any at the time. There would be 20 years later when there was movement and protests, and, like the Gandhi movie is sort of my impression of that time as well. But at the moment, I think what you had was what is described in the book, which is racial tension, riots, legal battles like they had in the novel. And the country is so big, it was not connected yet. It was not, people did not have a sense of themselves. But through this time period, I think, just like the characters in the novel, they were building a sense of what he calls the motherland. And maybe it's better to try to, reach across the aisle to get along with Hindus, rather than try to be friends with the English, because that's so complicated, as he finds out.
Yeah, that's also the how many people apparently have interpreted the last sentences when Fielding asks Aziz if they can be friends, and Aziz says no, not yet, and some source said that, well, after 1947 they could have been friends. After
they're standing on equal ground. Yeah, but otherwise, like, no, it's like saying, oh, it's it's like slavery in America. If you had slaves, could they be your friends? Were they required to be your friends? Is that an equal playing field? Did they have the choice to be your friend? No. So,
but anyhow, it must be pretty much different, because doesn't there's a certain because they all have servants, people like Aziz and his friends. They have servants that are way below them as well.
yes. And that's part of the caste system in India. So they have a even before the British presence, a very strict idea of the castes and colorism and issues with that persist to this day. So yeah.
And I was also
Huzur meant.
Sorry?
I had to figure out the context for Hazur. So I knew what Sahib meant. That meant like a gentleman, foreign gentleman. But Hazur is from the servant to the Indian. And that's like the same sort of respect title, but took a couple tries.
That's a bit difficult to imagine, because I think that Forster said, or the narrator says in the novel, that Aziz, he has servants, but he still lives in very poor conditions compared to the British, and that's from my perspective, in our 2021 life, having servants but living in a poor condition is pretty difficult to imagine.
It's a very different political context, and he even gets into the mind of, or treats us to a vision of, the person who's at the very end of that hierarchy, the person who's fanning I can't remember the name, where the palm leaf type fanning thing is in the courtroom. And it says, it's so dismal. It says he thinks of nothing. He can't expect anything better. He doesn't know that he's moving the fan. He just knows that he's moving a bar. And it's just like, so hopeless. So that was a downer. He doesn't see any revolution for the in-country native system that is in place. He's just really concerned with the Hindu-Muslim sort of relationship and the Indian-British relationship, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that was also, I was wondering why he chose a Muslim character as his central Indian character, because the Muslims are in a minority in India, and there are way more Hindus than Muslims, aren't there?
That's now, right?
Okay.
In the 1920s, before partition, they were more mixed, because I think they had sort of like a, kind of like Turkey and Greece. They had a point where they said, okay, everyone that's like this over here, everyone that's like this over here. But I think before it was much more regionally mixed. And one of the things I was not clear on historical context wise was, he talks about the Hindus being there, the Muslims conquering the Hindu state and being like the Rajas, because that's the Muslim empire, and then the British conquering them. And so that was like the order. So maybe that was like the precedence or the hierarchy. So when the British came in, they were speaking to officials who were of the Muslim state rather than the Hindu, which is sort of side by side. I don't know. We can get comments if people know better and want to educate us. Definitely appreciated. But
and he also won an award for this novel, and I didn't know anything about this award. Did you?
No,
James, you should know it, because it's Scottish. The James Tolt Black Memorial Prize for Fiction in 1924 went to a passage to India, and this is a Scottish award, and it's one of the oldest literary awards still existing. That was an interesting fact that I learned. James Bold Black. I think he was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
In Edinburgh, and famous people have won this award: D.H. Lawrence, Aldous Huxley, Graham Greene, Angus Wilson, Nadine Gordimer, and the last award that they handed out in 2019 for 2020 was for Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newbury Report, which I haven't read.
Oh. Huh.
And that was interesting, really, that there's still this award that is so old, because we always think about the Booker Prize and National Book Award, but there's very young prizes compared to this one.
Yeah, interesting. I haven't heard his name, so I assume he's like a rich person who furnished the money for the prize to begin on. It was after. And know where those profits come from, right? So you're Scottish people in the 1800s. It's tobacco trade and slavery. So it's full circle.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What about characters? So I thought it was interesting that along with the criticism that the resolution was vague and it doesn't tie up sort of what we should be thinking about the characters, there's also character arcs that are sort of wibbly wobbly. And I sort of wrote out what I thought of people at the beginning and what I thought of people at the end. And some move up and some move down, but not too much. So what did you think about that? Did you have favorite, least favorite, any arcs that you particularly liked? And tell me if you are going to say a spoiler, and I'll put up the banner.
Yeah, that's of course that's a problem with a spoiler probably, because I mean the development of both Fielding and Aziz, according to what happens in the novel, are a bit strange to me. I think I don't like any of the characters very much. I have sympathy for them. I like them a little bit, but they are not characters that I would love to. Don't want to be in the book acting as one of the characters.
Right. I agree.
So I watch them and what they do, and I feel sympathy for them, and they're pretty stubborn in a way, both, and they have their problems from their cultural predisposition that doesn't allow them to open up already in the 1924 to the other ones. So that's also, I think, something that is probably very modern about Forster's novel here, that he is that he understands this impossibility at the time of 1924 to really embrace and have this diverse sort of capability of I don't want to say that we have it today, probably not, but to sort of embrace the other one's history, cultural history, and problems connected to speaking what they feel. I mean, both of them have that. Fielding and Fielding, for example, and I think that's not a spoiler. When Fielding goes back to Adela Quested, he supports her. I mean, that's not a spoiler. That is somehow difficult to understand because of what has happened before.
Okay. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you're trying not to be a spoiler, but it's
yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Put this up and let it loose. We're free reign now.
I mean, okay, she has accused Aziz of rape, and or I think the word rape is never said.
No, it's insult. The woman is insulted. Yeah,
exactly. So we don't actually know. It could have been something close to that, but. And then there's a trial against Aziz, but then she suddenly withdraws her statement, which I think is pretty courageous of her, because almost everybody else in the British section wants to go on with this and wants to have a verdict against. Right. Sorry?
They have to be right.
Yeah, they have to be right. Exactly. They want to have a verdict against Aziz, so she has a lot of courage to withdraw this, and then Aziz. I don't really understand why Aziz cannot regard this as something great, even if, of course, she has done something bad to him before, and at the same time that Fielding is leaving Aziz and following Adela in Adila's footsteps behind her to take care of her. Yeah. And then, of course, this wonderful misinterpretation, or the fake news of 1924 that Fielding has married her.
Oh, yeah. Well, I thought that there would be a misunderstanding, but then when it said a woman in the letter, and I was like, who else do they both know? I was like, what? Who could it be? Okay, they must have married. That's stupid. Then I was happy it was a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Okay, but to get back to the characters, I'm going to leave the spoiler thing up just in case I say something that is spoilery. So Aziz, I liked 7 out of 10. He went up 1. He's a very interesting character. He is portrayed somewhat stereotypically as more emotional than the British and more irrational. That's, I think, like a classic old cheat thing to do. And by the end, I think the author graduates him to a more nuanced understanding, a more British type character, which is a little problematic. Let's see. We've got Mrs. Moore. She started out as an 8 and went down to a 6 because she totally let me down. Like, she started off as interesting, sympathetic with the culture. Even if she was a little starry-eyed about the real India, I felt that she was like a friend, like a real friend to Aziz. And then the incident at the caves makes her back off, and she's like, I can't handle this. I can't handle this, like, double vision, seeing things, and there's no religion, and everything I have is crumbling, and she just can't get over it. And like, I'm like, lady.
And then she just leaves and dies.
Yeah. So that was disappointing. Let's see. Adela, I said started off as 5 because she was super annoying at the beginning, and went up to a 7 because of the courage point that you mentioned. She sort of vanishes at the end. She's definitely not a central character, as you said. So meh. Mr. Fielding, I said 8, goes up to a 9. He's like travels light. That's an interesting phrase, which means that he doesn't get attached and he doesn't get invested. So he's not courageous at all at the beginning. He has unconventional views for which I like him, but then they're tested. He stands by his friends, and at the end, I feel like he's been more courageous and sort of paid the price, and so I like him better, but yeah.
He's not a hero. It's not the hero that we want sometimes want in books.
Yeah.
The real good character, the all good character.
Right. So one of the things that popped up in my head as a comparison was To Kill a Mockingbird. I can't remember if I sent this to you. Have you read that?
No.
Okay. So basically the comparison is because there's a racially divided society. Someone is falsely accused, and it's from a powerful to a powerless person. And they go on trial, and someone stands up for them who's like a white savior and comes out, and it's sort of muddly at the end, and there's other things that come into play. But it's like, it's a white gaze project. That's the other thing that came to mind, because that's one of the things that's been going around on BookTube. So maybe we can talk about that for a bit without being spoilery. So the white gaze that I see in To Kill a Mockingbird is that there's a white lawyer who comes in and defends the black man who hasn't done anything wrong. And that's seen as the hero role. And in A Passage to India, I feel like the white gaze of the author is lifting up Mr. Fielding as someone who's standing by a friend and not making Aziz the central character who is accused when he started out being the central character. So it sort of like migrates onto the real complex emotions of the novel are Fielding's rather than Aziz's. I don't know. I'm a like 47-53 on that.
Yeah.
I can't decide.
But that's probably the way it is, and I don't blame Forster for that, because he lived 100 years ago,
Right.
and he was already super progressive for his time.
Yep.
I mean, what would we have written when we had lived in the 1920s? We would have been much wider than we are today, probably, and much more focused on our heritage and where we come from.
Right.
But that's interesting. I have to look it up. To Kill a Mockingbird. I know it's a very American book. I think every American has read it, probably.
Yeah,
that's what I hear. But it would be interesting to know if it was Harper Lee, wasn't it? The author. If he has written, she. Oh my God, sorry. If she has read A Passage to India.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I didn't look up whether anyone's compared these before, so I'm sure it's not an original thought. It's pretty obvious. But the time is off a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. I assume she had when she wrote it, but I hadn't seen conversations about it. But yeah, he is very progressive. He's leaping forward in leaps and bounds in terms of, I think in the middle of the novel, I was saying definitely socially, it's obvious that he has unconventional ideas. He talks about atheism. He talks about like cross-religion understanding, cross-racial understanding. And then, as you mentioned, politically, by the end, he's definitely declared his like solidarity. And in the article that I saw, he said the author actually responded to a criticism from a colonial official that he had been unfair, and said kind of the same thing he puts in the novel. I'm sure you've seen a lot of India in your 20 years there, but I was there 2 years and I observed this and this in my experience, and just sort of put it down as this is my experience to be true, and these are my beliefs. And so I was like, yes, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think the whole novel is very political, because the way he describes this colonial life is at least for me, it's a way there's a lot of arrogance, and already in the beginning, a lot of imperial behavior to the servants that I really dislike, and it doesn't make the colonial world, which is a very rich world, any kind of nice or something that I would like to live. So he depicts it in a very I think it's pretty clear on which side he is from the beginning, that he doesn't like this stuff.
Right.
The polo games and the clubs and this useless conversations and
he makes it very clear. Yeah, useless, exactly. Yeah. And the people that you sympathize with as characters find it very restrictive. Like, yeah, good, right? Because the reader finds it pretty restrictive. You only can say like certain things. Your emotional reactions have a certain, narrow gauge to go through. And, you obviously have to pick sides. And the thing about the British women and Indians is just very stark for me as well. There's 2 more people on that character list, Mr. Heslop and Mr. Godboll. So what would you say about them? They were definitely like secondary, used to prove a point. Do you think they had a special function to the story?
I have to say that I looked that up, and I don't know, can't say so much about Heslop, but you mean Ronnie, or his
the intended bridegroom.
I totally dislike him, because basically, I mean, he's sort of representing Britain, I think. And Godboll is that's what sources have said, that he represents the Hindu world. Actually, this is very interesting. I looked a little bit into the movie by David Lean. Yeah, Sir David Lean, probably. Have you seen the movie? No, you haven't.
So I've seen a little bit of it. There's a 1965.
1984.
1984 is like the big one but I haven't watched the whole thing. It's on my list.
I watched the first half because I found it somewhere on not YouTube and not Vimeo, somewhere else on a platform, and I watched only the first part, and it's pretty close to the novel, I think, because there are quotes from the novel that you recognize the actor saying, and that's also very. But it seems to be a great movie, because it has this huge setting of movies that they had in the 80s with Gandhi and with Out of Africa at the same time, and it was nominated for a couple. But there's one thing about Godboll, and that's why I come to the movie, is that Godboll is played by Sir Alec Guinness, and he's blackfaced.
Oh no! Yeah. Oh my God,
that's horrible. So I thought, was that politically okay in the 1980s to do this? I don't know.
Yeah, that's like the edge of our modern era. That's dangerous. That's terrible.
But watch it. It has great actors with Judy Davis and Dame Peggy Ashcroft. I think she has a Dame, Sir Alec Guinness, and great pictures.
Yeah, I watched like the beginning scene in the mosque, and it seemed like it was good to go on with. I didn't watch the full thing. What was I gonna say? Heslop. Okay, so when you compare Ronnie Heslop, the intended bridegroom character, to Britain, that's interesting, because I was trying to find some sort of overarching progress that could compare to the British Empire, sort of like a larger picture. And I was trying to think, so there's the sentimental part, like when Adela Quested and Ronnie Heslop are like, yeah, it's not gonna work. Let's just be friends. And then there's like a little car accident where like they are sort of thrown together and sort of find comfort in a moment. And it's very circumstantial and it's very sentimental, and that is enough to sort of push them over the edge to be like, oh yes, let's get married. And they also kind of like, what? That sentimentalism, I feel like, is a little bit poking fun of like the previous British generation, because there's no basis for it. There's understanding that one thing is right and going the other way anyway. And so it's a very clear mismatch of idealist and pragmatic, although I'm not using that with a capital P because I don't know about the movement. But I thought that was very interesting to put early on and then develop the mismatch and then have it fall apart very forcefully and then sort of straggle on. And then finally, like, he has to, well, anyway, that's a spoiler, so I won't go into that, but that was interesting.
But this car accident scene is also one of the scenes why I thought that Adela was so young.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe the actress pushed you that way without the character, because I haven't seen that much of it. Hi,
no,
Jim.
I mean her. Hi, Jim. Her the way she behaves in the novel with that accident, that she doesn't want to marry him. She says, no, let's be friends, and then comes the accident. They get together. Okay, let's marry. Okay.
Yep.
And also when she asks Aziz about the about his wife and about doesn't she ask him about how many wives he has or something?
Yes. Okay. So that was part of the ignorance of the British public. Totally. Yeah. He's very offended at that. I think that was a very well done sort of introduction of here's where they're coming from, idealistic, ignorant, and just insulting people left and right without knowing it. And so that's part of the colonial project. That's what they're there to do.
I found a great quote about the novel by an Indian writer named, who I don't know, named Preti Tania. And she writes, this novel, Passage to India, it haunts writers with the implication of what can be achieved by what is not said. And that is really also something that the creation of atmospheres and of feelings without really clearly say things, but you that people are, like Aziz, for example, is so injured by the question of Adela.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are much more scenes where characters are where you feel that there's something happening with the characters, but it's not said.
Do you mean not said in dialogue, or
not said not said at all in the novel? You have to find it somehow.
I feel like the narrator puts his oar in quite a lot in terms of interpreting what's in people's heads. Don't you?
Yeah, maybe, but not so clearly. It's really. I think it's a really interesting book, and I also looked up what kind of other books were written in the time, and we have in the same year Thomas Mann publishes Der Zauberberg in Germany, The Magic Mountain, which he had written for 10-12 years, and 5 years later, and that would be a novel to read as well. In a future reading club, is Berlin Alexanderplatz by Alfred Döblin. Have you heard about that one? I think it's called Berlin Alexander Square, probably in English.
Okay.
It's from 1929, but it's a very, very chunky book.
Okay.
700-800 pages where he describes the life of Franz Bieberkopf, who is released from prison. And it's also modern German. That's modern German literature where Bieberkopf is released from prison. He has killed a prostitute and he wants to live a normal life, but he gets drawn back into his world of the bad people in Berlin. It's really, and in the Weimar Republic as well, where Germany is sort of moving towards Nazism. Yeah. That's very clear in the novel. Yeah. That was a great time, and that was great. The March of the Moderns is a great and important time for literature.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking about last night and this morning, I've been thinking about Roz's comment about comic novels. I don't know if you saw her video. Yeah, so she was talking, she did her March of the Moderns video, sort of roundup of her books, and she read comic novels and British. So she was pointing out that, so it's a golden age for a lot of novels. Like it's crime fiction with Agatha Christie, Harlem Renaissance in America. What was the beginning one? Sort of sentimental. I can't remember what the first one she pointed out, but she said it was also the age of P.G. Wodehouse and, classic British comic novels. And I thought that's interesting. She asked if there were American, Australian, Irish equivalents to sort of, and I thought, no, that's interesting. I think we're on a different timeline because the British experience has been growing and maturing in terms of fiction. And I think, and I don't know if this is the video to put it in, but there's an interesting comment about the boredom of the British Empire at this period. And that's why comedy hit so well. Because it's all about nothing. And America was not in that place at all. I think America has been in such a struggle. At that point, they're maturing to like the beginning of diverse voices and really taking a stand. So I feel like the 10s, especially 20s, especially 30s, there are a lot of people who are not the main WASP ruling minority who are finding their voice and making important statements about identity at that time period. And so it was not let's toss off something about nothing that makes everyone laugh because it was so tense. I feel like that's what I've been sort of like contemplating in the last half a day. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, when I think of the 20s in the United States, I think of all those movies about the alcohol prohibition.
Oh,
and Al Capone was it 1920s already?
Yeah, 30s. Yeah.
All this organized crime, starting organized crime and wildlife, the Roaring Twenties, a lot of bars, the Cotton Club. I saw that movie from Francis Ford Coppola. And of course, as you say, the British have a different history. They have an empire that is still existing, but slowly fading and getting more and more pale. And they're trying somehow to uphold this empire where the United States was sort of bursting into the 20th century with the Wild West was gone, the West was explored, and then now everything had to be sort of organized and structured, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
It seems maybe totally, I'm just spontaneously thinking here.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So Jim had a comment. Jim had a comment about "We" by Yevgeny Zamyatin. Are you familiar with this? I'm definitely not.
No.
A big influence on Brave New World. That sounds like something that you might be interested to discuss.
Absolutely.
And then Beth Ann's here. Yay, Beth Ann. Cultural discussion. Developing these thoughts more. I know. It's just the seed. It's just sprouting. So I think I definitely need like some more time and more fertilizer and water. Yes. And then Prohibition. Jim's giving us the dates here. 1920 to 1933. The 18th. No. Maybe it was the 18th Amendment and then the 20th was repealing it because the 19th was the one for women to vote. It's ridiculous. But yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff. Let's see. I had a couple things I had questions about. The Echo. So we're getting into like the last few minutes here. What did you think of The Echo? And maybe I'll put the spoiler thing up here.
But that is so difficult to. I think everyone can have his own thoughts about that. The echoes, the boom, or what was a boom or the sound?
Yeah. So just for people who want to know and are not planning on reading the novel and like me can like forget it within 2 or 3 years and have a perfect non-spoiled reading experience. The Echo is what happens when they go into the caves that confuses people. So the caves are sort of like circular, narrow, and there's these natural phenomena. There's no carving, there's no painting. It's just like this natural phenomena that people have visited called the Marabar Caves that they go out to on this outing. And the two women are the medium by which we experience the caves. The older woman is totally flustered because she hears this sound that is described as a boom that is laying to waste all her illusions of religion and order and like social hierarchy. And she comes out and she's just like, oh my God, what just happened? My whole worldview is gone. You're like, what? And the younger woman goes in and hears an echo, and it comes in later. She hears it later, and it's like a nervous disease almost. And, you know, just to calm my nerves, I have a glass of Edwardian, it's port. It should be sherry, to be correct.
I have a glass of Portuguese wine here.
There you go. But she hears it later, and it's just like a disturbing thing that like she can't deal with, and it ends up like maybe giving her a hallucination, just upsetting her in general. We don't know what happens. So with that introduction, Rainer, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, but I don't know what to make of it. It's like you said, maybe it's the echo is there to sort of make them lose their sense of order. The characters but also those echoes really exist. I mean, I think I remember when I was a kid, we were with my parents and somewhere in southern Germany that echoes sometimes come later when you say something. The echo comes back in a different way, sometimes with a sort of gap of 2 or 3 seconds, maybe from one part of the cave. So that is really existing. But it's strange how Adela reacts to that. It seems like she comes into a trance as well as Mrs. Moore, that almost drug kind of feeling that they are on a drug experience in those caves, and they sort of turn the whole thing upside down. And they cause the problems also, the echoes, because it's the echo that makes Adela lose her mind.
Yeah. So. Yes.
I think I believe her that she really believes that Aziz did something to her.
Yeah, insulted her.
I don't think that she made that up.
Right.
For herself. She's honestly believing that.
Yeah. And again, this is like has a parallel in To Kill a Mockingbird, because the woman who is the witness, the white woman, has like a did I make it up sort of thing, because she's in a separate sort of dangerous situation, which makes it really interesting. Anyway, so when you said there are places where the reverberation comes back and it's somehow mutated and it's like delayed, and I thought that's even better. So what I think it represented was like, there's the conquering, like there's the violence of the original British presence in all its colonies, and that violence and that racism and that governing is going to come back to bite you in the ass, Britain. So it feels like it's the symbol, and this could be very beginner English, like English class analysis, but I feel like it's very much a people actually encountering in a symbol what's happening on the societal level, that there's something that's coming back that's very disturbing, and that's going to make you think, and that's going to shatter your illusions, and make you deal with reality as it is, and treat people as equals.
Yeah, and also seeing they want to see the real India all the time, and now they sort of experience the real India with those caves, and they cannot make anything out of it. They don't understand it.
But
it's another part of the mystery. Sorry?
Do the Indians understand
No,
it?
of course not. Of course not. Because I think they think it's something supernatural.
Oh, right. How did they describe it? It was like visited by I can't remember. I know they talked about like the original Muslim kings or gods or whatever was in their legends. The emperors, I can't remember the names anymore. They came and there's some legends about them making it, but obviously it's a natural occurrence, I would think.
But those caves, they seem to be pretty boring sites, but they don't have so much.
The collision of the British and Indian cultures.
Yeah.
The clash. I don't know. I like mine better. I think it's like the echo or the boomerang that's coming back to like hit you in the face after you thought you were okay. Okay, so that's for the echo. I thought that was very interesting. Mrs. Moore, we sort of discussed. I was disappointed. You were like, she just sort of fades away. You were not impressed. The cave. So we've got let's see, the caves. The caves is a symbol. The passage and the caves sort of lend a suggestion of birth or rebirth or revolution to me. Did that come across to you at all? Did you feel like there were any other things?
No, but the passage, of course, sounds pretty logical. That India is on a passage to independence. Of course, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
that sounds logical.
Okay.
But the cave as a symbol for
birth?
For birth. No. I didn't think of it.
Okay. All right. So then the last sort of question I had about the symbolism, which I'll take this off for that, was from the character of Mr. Godbole, the Hindu character representing all of the religion in this book. Very early on, he says there's a song or something where you say, come, come, come to God. The narrator says it, then Godbole says it, and then it's referenced many times afterwards, this suggestion of saying, come, come, come to God, but God never comes. And I thought this was very interesting. Did that hit you at all? Did that connect to anything else when you were reading it?
Well, can you repeat that?
Let's see. I have the page number. So Godbole saying, come, come to God, and God never coming. So let me look up where it is. Page 158.
That's impossible to go that quickly into the Kindle.
Oh no, he refuses to come, repeated Godbole, perhaps not understanding her question. I say to him, come, 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 come. He neglects to come. So this is him talking about his song. It's part of the verse or the religious thing that he's singing, and he's explaining what it is. And I thought this is very interesting, and I'm not sure like how to connect it to the rest, but it just popped up so many times as a repeated motif that I'm like, it's got to be important. I just need someone to point out, like,
yeah, probably. We need someone who's more into religion or who knows more about religions than I do. Because certainly there's a discussion of all the three religions, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism as well. There's a lot of knowledge.
There's not much about Christianity. Here, there's not much about Christianity. So there's also atheism, which is
that's right. That's atheism. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. There's some Christians who have become atheists, like or Christianized people, like Fielding.
Yeah. So, okay, here, this quote I loved. Okay, I highlighted it. It's near the beginning, page 120. I highlighted it because it says, it's talking about Fielding. It says, he had no racial feeling, not because he was superior to his brother civilians, blah, 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 blah. He only said this to be cheery. He did not realize that white has no more to do with a color than God save the king with a God. And I had to read that several times. So to me, that means that when the British are in India, they use white not to mean the skin color is the most important, but that their community and whatever subcategory that they belong to is superior. And so the white is about white supremacy. It doesn't really have to do with the color. Just like God Save the King is more concerned with that subcategory of people being superior and having a king and him being right, rather than God being their savior or having something over them. I thought that was so brilliant. Just like a small thing, but I had to go over it several times.
Yeah, I found that sentence too, but I didn't read it so many times. But that's of course the white thing is of course. I mean, we speak a lot about European values very often, and that we have to stick to our European values here in Europe. And this is such a dangerous discussion because the European values are exactly colonialism and racism and exploiting other continents and other countries.
But to me, as an American, I think of European values being more socialism focused and more like communitarian like redistribution. That's what we see as the difference.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's only one part of Europe. The other part is our history, of course, and that's the old colonial history as empires. And the other one is, of course, that countries like Poland and Hungary, they have a totally different understanding of European values and of human rights and of women's rights, for example. Especially if you look to Poland right now.
Ooh,
So this.
okay.
This white and God, of course, God save the king. The king is the sort of like the Pope, the representative of God on earth.
In this time period, yes. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking more about like the reflexive nature of that statement, right? So when people say God save the king, in that context, I think what it means is, are you one of us? Do you stand when they say this saying, whatever? Do you know how to act in a certain situation? If so, you're good. If not, like, there's the door. And I feel like a similar saying in America could be God bless America. Like, you're not actually thinking about God when you say that. You're thinking about, are you an American patriot? Do you fit into our club? If not, there's the door. You know, that kind of attitude.
You have that in sports with all the treatment of the American flag and the kneeling ahead of soccer games or football games.
Yeah, and that I think is a bit of a different discussion, because that's
totally different.
And yeah. It's all good, but it's
tempting.
Yeah, Passage to India. So have you?
It's probably a book that you have to read 2 times. That you have to reread. I mean, there are some books you cannot. I cannot reread many books, but this actually feels like one where also I think that I've missed so many details, probably because I don't know about certain things, because I missed them for some other reason. Because it needs your focus 100% all of the time.
I think I'd like to read it with the Wikipedia notes that are like linked to the words. That'd be helpful, because I was just reading it with like a clean ebook copy, or an annotated version maybe. Yeah.
And it's on so many lists of the 100 best novels of all times that it's really incredible. And then sometimes there's a sense of that this is really a great book. I mean, great in the sense of maybe one of the greater books of the 20th century.
Right. So when I was looking at the E.M. Forster approach to this book, and I was looking at when he wrote it, he wrote his others, Howard's End, Where Angels Fear to Tread, A Room with a View, before, and they were dealing with English people abroad. Did you watch Katie at Books and Things thing about E.M. Forster Week?
No, I have to see that.
Oh, okay. She did this a couple weeks ago, I think. She did like a week where she took all of his novels that she'd read and loved them all, and explained why she loved them all differently. But she was talking about how she loves seeing English people in a different situation and how they act and how that reflects their character, because they're in a foreign situation, and how that's unique to the English experience. But the books that he wrote before were more about that, and more about English society of manners and class distinctions. Whereas Passage to India and what he wrote afterwards, which was posthumously published, Movieish, more about like much bigger things. He was breaking the mold. He was stepping out and being vulnerable. And that's why he didn't publish Movieish until after, or he didn't publish it. And so that's probably why it breaks out into the great, because it goes outside of its like border. It's agreed upon subjects for the time period. Yeah. So I would read Movieish to compare with this rather than one of the earlier novels, is what I mean. In terms of
but I wonder why he stopped writing novels, because he was like, how old was he when it was, I think 79, 21? He was like 45, 46 when he wrote The Passage to India as his last novel. But the guy lived for almost 90 years. He lived 90 years, I think, 91 when he died. So why did he stop writing? I mean, he was a good writer.
Because he couldn't publish what he wanted to write. It wasn't ready for him.
That might be the reason, yeah. Do you know anything of this, or?
Just very little. Just like the 2 articles that I was reading.
Okay.
And Katie's video. So she actually got very emotional talking about it because the book that he ended up writing but never publishing was the one that was the one about his experience being a gay man and not being able to come out and not being able to express his love. And it was very affecting. And I have not read it, but I feel like, well, what would you do with 40 years of people knowing that you're a good writer and not being able to write what you want? I think you kind of just went like, all right, then you got what you're going to get. If you're not ready, then I'll just sit here and like enjoy what I've got. I mean, I don't know. I don't know much else about his life. So that would be an interesting topic to follow up on.
But that's also an interesting topic to ask the question, how many writers like him were there who wanted to write something they couldn't write because the time was just not ripe for publishing stuff like this. And how those people, because you must suffer if you are like a born writer, which you are as well, and you're not, you cannot go out to people with your ideas, and you have all those. He must have had ideas in his head which he couldn't write down,
right?
Or maybe he had some secret things that he wrote, because he worked for the BBC for many years, and he worked with George Orwell. Must have been a very interesting period as well. Worked with a guy like Orwell. But
oh, right. Okay, so just like catching up, we're a little over time here. I hope that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No. It's okay for me if it's okay for you. Many discussion points coming out that need to be explored, and she only joined at the cave symbolism part. So hi, Katya, thank you for being here. It's totally needs more discussion and roundtable discussion for sure. And yes, so Beth Ann is reading Maurice for March of the Moderns, and so she'll be, maybe you read that and then watch this at the beginning and then tell us like if there are themes that cross over or like progressions that you can see. That'd be good. Jim's got a journal entry. I should have been a more famous writer if I'd written or rather published more, but sex prevented the latter. Interesting. Yeah, because he would have been locked up or charged with a crime if he wrote about his love stories. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
Yeah.
That there was so much. I have never thought about that extensively. That there was so much creative talent in the world that couldn't get out.
Either social conventions or publishing restrictions or criminal, risks that were being run. Interesting. Yeah. Imagine all those secret documents that are in the drawer that just got thrown out when someone died, and you're like, who is it? Someone was talking, I think the Bookstore podcast was talking about, I can't remember where it was. I've been reading and listening a lot of things. They're talking about Lauren Groff and how she will write something that is an entire book, be dissatisfied with it, and throw it away and start over on a new thing. Like they're just like, can we have that? Because that's probably good. Like, don't throw it away. But that's just people's process, and it just gets like mulched back into ideas for other books, and you just have to sort of accept it. But I guess people who, I wonder if there were other manuscripts. Someone who's more of a Forster fan may know, like, if there were other things besides Maurice that were hidden away or partially done. But in terms of my own, I'm not swimming out past that border yet. I don't feel like any of mine would be like scandalous if published. So still pushing that boundary, trying to get there.
Today it's difficult to write things that are way out of line to not finding a publisher somewhere.
Yeah. Can you think of anything recent that's come across?
Of course, in our countries. Of course, in our countries where we live, not in other countries. There are lots of writers who are not allowed to publish what they would love to publish.
Right. That's true. Yes. Okay, so I think I have any other questions? Patriarchy, anti-imperialism. Oh, does this book come out being pro anything? That's my final question.
Wow, pro anything? I think it's an early book of pro diversity in a way. He could not deliver the whole package because it was too early 100 years ago, but this is really a book that is, I mean, the ending is such an open end where it says, no, not yet. So it is actually advocating a dialogue between the cultures, but not yet. It's not yet possible.
Yeah. You think
And
it's
maybe to think it real big now, maybe even Forster about his sexuality. It's all maybe he's this not yet also means his own sexual, that he knows that right now in 1924 I'm not able to publish what I want to publish, but not yet. This not yet stands for a lot of things in this book maybe. And he understood that, and of course he must have suffered.
Yeah. I think that, so personal level and country level, I think self-determination is what he's like pointing at here. So that works for both of the things that you just said, like his own love life, not yet, because it's illegal. And for the country, not yet, because those small movements are still erupting, but not connecting together in a sense. And he can see that, which is amazing. Gosh, I wonder, maybe Jim will tell us if he had diary entries about like the Indian independence movement and how that was happening, because he lived through it. But did he write nonfiction about it? Like, did he write any, like, that'd be so neat to explore.
That would be interesting to get in contact with some Forster specialists at some universities who really did a lot of research on his work.
Oh gosh, Katya's got a juicy tidbit. Newspaper referring to his diary says his creative drive disappeared after losing his virginity in his 30s to a wounded soldier on a beach in Egypt. What? Bombshell. Okay, well that needs to pop it up.
That's breaking news.
He no longer felt able to write about the subjects upon which his reputation was based. Wow. Huh. Oh gosh. Well, this is good. This is like breaking open a can of something for March of the Moderns.
Yeah. Sad. Again.
Yeah. Well,
not a happy life.
Thank you so much for participating in this discussion. I know I didn't really have time for this. Usually they go about an hour, but we're at an hour 20, and it's been a fabulous discussion. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's see.
I have to do this again sometime.
Yes, and you know who I just saw their video? Courtney Farrader said you were doing a buddy read of White Tiger.
Yes,
we're doing that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's gonna be so good. You're gonna have to like bring in some comparisons.
Yeah, we're going back to India.
Because I read White Tiger like 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
And like vaguely remember some of the pieces. And so like I wasn't able to bring that into this discussion, but I feel like having the books so closely together would be really interesting for you to comment.
Yeah, I saw the Netflix movie, and the movie is absolutely fascinating. That's
I haven't seen it yet.
Movie, but I'm very curious about the novel now.
Yeah, I remember being very claustrophobic feeling. So yeah, I will be very excited to hear.
And that's a great thing about Netflix right now. They're doing a lot of Indian productions now with great actors that we haven't seen in our parts of the world before.
Yeah. Oh, Jim's saying good night. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up and let you guys know that I have 2 more books. 2 more buddy reads. Let's see. Sunday at noon Pacific time, we've got The Enchanted April with 4 of us talking. So that's going to be quite the chitter jib jab. We'll probably go over an hour for that one. And then Wednesday, I have Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston with historian Donna Sinclair, who is local here as well. And that's also at noon on Wednesday, March 31st. So tune in for those. And then coming up next month, the Patreon book club is going to be reading Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. I've heard both ways, so now I'm not sure who's right.
Sounds so German, her name, actually.
How would you say it in German?
Erdrich.
Erdrich.
Because it has the CH ending. Sounds pretty German to me.
Yeah. Well, she's a Native American author, so I am not sure where the name comes from. Could be any German tradition that is in that area. But I haven't read her yet, and she's a huge voice in Native Indigenous lit. And so like I'm finally remedying that with the Patreon book club. So that's exciting. In case you're interested in joining, that is my Patreon page, which has details on the book club. And think that is everything. Did you have anything that's going on soon that you wanted to tell people about? I posted your channel, so I'll put that up for
Oh,
you.
that's good. No, not yet.
Okay. You're
On
moving
Sunday.
soon.
I'm
Yeah.
moving soon, yeah, but that's a lot of work ahead of me. But I'm just moving in like 4 or 5 miles from here, but to a pretty new apartment. Absolutely, I'm the first one to live there.
Are you
That's
packing
really
yet?
nice. Yeah, my books are already almost all the books are packed. Only the little TBR that's left.
The one that we helped you choose.
Exactly.
That's so fun.
Hmm.
Oh, that's good. Good. Well, thank you so much, Rainer. Thank you, everyone who
Thanks.
stopped by to comment and give us these juicy tidbits that we didn't bother looking up. That was useful. And March of the Moderns. We're almost winding it up, and it's been great. So visit the playlist. I've put together all the people's videos who are participating and commented on their books along the way. So I've got a playlist for March of the Moderns, and that should be great if anyone wants to see what people were talking about this month after this point. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of the day or evening or night.